Chapter 2, The Diversity of Families. And let me just run over for you and let you see what that looks like. Here is the look at the chapter outline here. First of all, just the definition of family and a little pitch about survival, but then the stages of parenthood, they do pretty good there. And then spend quite a bit of time looking at the different families. And this really does not scratch the surface. It doesn't do a lot with this one, but it is interesting it includes this. And so you'll be involved in some of that. And then parenting styles, functions, social issues. It does pretty well at that. And then it goes through these, like divorced, blended families, ones headed by grandparents, and poverty, homeless. Spends a lot of time on these here at the end. And does a nice job. So it'll scratch the surface and create an awareness maybe that you don't have how different they are. And I don't think you've seen anything yet. In your time as a teacher, you'll see this continue to expand what this looks like, this diversity of families. Our traditional families, of course, are in decline, and so you prepare to work with different groups, different types of family structures than in the past. So let's have a look here. Here is the learning outcomes for this, the definition of family, those 5 stages of parenthood, those diverse family things, the parenting styles, and then those social issues that affect families. So first of all, let's look at the definition. If we come back here to the textbook. Okay, so I want you to hook onto this right away. It defines family as a group of 2 or more people who reside together who are related by birth, marriage, or adoption. So that's family, while household is defined as all people who occupy a housing unit as their usual place of residence. And so I'm going to ask you to start with that. Not this so much right here that you I'm going to make this number 1, the difference between family and household. Okay, so that'd be number 1. And I pointed that out here. The definition of family fits many of the families today, particularly those who come from culturally, linguistic, diverse backgrounds. And so I'm going to clip this here to begin with and be your first clip to bring in. Okay, let me just look at this a little bit with you. First of all, let's look at the bottom here, married couples with children. Of course, this is households now. This isn't definition of family, definition of households. And from 1970, that was 40% to down here, so less than half of what it was then. And what that really means is less married people. When we look at married couples without children, this also includes people whose children are out of the house. But we have less, even though we now include marriage of 2 people of the same gender, and we see a lot more of those than we did here over the years. It's just we have less marriage, more people having children without marriage. And so again, an old guy like me that's used to tradition, this is a little bit hard, but it's reality. And then the same here, you still see this from here, people marry later maybe. Other families, the yellow, then men living alone has went up, and what that's code for is living not married. And same with women here, that numbers went up because it's direct proportionate to this. okay, and other non-family households is increased with these the change in the marriage status. So even though we said allowing same-gender marriage wouldn't affect marriages, it has. The marriages have continually declined over the years, and so and that's not new. That doesn't affect your job really. It doesn't affect teaching. It's just an awareness. Okay, so that's households. This is the importance of family. Unit and socialization of children cannot be overstated. Have supportive, interactive environment. Provide loving, caring relationships. Permanent relationship of that consistency, and none of this is new. You know this, and we're kind of used to this here. Interesting here, a traditional family here, because Dr. Rojas generally leans something that's not traditional. Okay, I want to pop back over here. Different types of households. I showed you the importance of family and socialization. So I would like you to make this number 2, and you make one statement about the importance of children with socialization, and that comes from right here. Okay. Now the survival here of families. Society depends on families. Families across cultures in different ways display affection. Cannot thrive physically or emotionally without the nurturance of those who love or care for them. Special needs. He talks about autism here, just like educated extended family members such as grandparents provide support. Often take the responsibility of teaching children rearing practices. Example, this may be done through this. And again, it reflects, this is on the test this term, so you want to know this. It reflects Dr. Rojas's background. She's Latino background, so she brings that in here. Our cultural narratives here. Okay. Extended family, importance of understanding family's culture and social practices. Okay. And that's that there. So let's look at the stages of parenthood. Okay. So, in the stage of parenthood developed by Galinsky, divide parenthood into 6 levels, developed much like a child's stage of development. So here's the first stage, the image making, and here this will be number 3. And you will hit these 6 things here, and they're on the test. So now you know you have to connect these. So first, image making here before the birth of a child. The nurturing is when the attachment develops during infancy. Then authority. Families teach children rules and consequences. Interpretive is the 4th stage. Parents learn to interpret their social reality. And then interdependent this occurs during high school, teen years. Parents during the stage learn to reinforce authority. And then, of course, departure. When they exit. So that will be the stages of this for you. And then these types of families. And let's have a look at this. The diversity of families. Stage of family development. Okay, the structure, stage of family development, family size, ages, and genders of the children all figure up the make of a unique family. This one is interesting here because in my day, family size, I don't know what it was, but I was one of 11 children, and we weren't really that big a family back in the 70s. Now, of course, you would have to have a blended family to get to that many, and that's what's interesting about family size is it doesn't always take into account what those relationships are, because not only traditional family considered size, but anybody that lives in there that's related somehow. So you go back to the definition of family, and that would contribute to family size, because it doesn't necessarily have to be traditional. course, and their ages, because in these new structured families or households, if you will, those ages can be from adults down to young children, because often multi-generational live in the same household or family, and they're considered family size from all that. Okay, the single parent family, the teenage mother, and the thing about all of these, and we're going to look at these in our project, is it doesn't really tell you how to address them or work with them. Okay, so here, single parent family here, and so I'll just flip over here and say it's like this. Is mother or father could be single, and often there's some duress explained to that, and sometimes not. And then the teenage mother, and then the two-parent family experiencing homelessness, and we'll get into homelessness later. And then the two-income family, both parents working, all socioeconomic backgrounds. And as you know, those are dramatically different, and hopefully we can look at those. Then the immigrant family, documented or undocumented, and those of you that tense up a little bit like this, there's been several court cases, press clear, the Supreme Court says people that are undocumented still have the right to a FAPE, FAPE being free, appropriate public education. And so that's created some dynamics, interesting dynamics too. And then the grandparents raising grandchildren, and reasons are different for their there. And again, for the most part, we'll look at that later. But when it's grandparents, it never was their intention. Often it's by default that the grandparents are raising children, so there always seems to be some distress that goes with that, and you just need to know that as a teacher. And then this new family structure, same gender families, and getting to be more and more common. We know several families that are same gender families raising children. Okay, so here, these just kind of take you through examples of these. But I say what they don't tell you is how their needs are unique, and as for you as the teacher, how to communicate with them, how to, you know, what special support do they need. Okay, and then this. Okay, down here, it's important that educators understand each and how these structures and others discuss. All families need guidance, but in different ways, depending on their immediate needs. For instance, families not familiar with the school system will need more guidance to understand the school expectations. Teachers should ensure that information is relevant to the families. For example, teachers can make school routines, procedures parent-friendly by making things easy for parents. Never a good idea to scold parents who do not follow procedures, because this only creates barriers between those. So that is the different types of families. So here is the function of families. Okay, the forms of families provide similar roles. ch2lect says here they are: nurturing, guiding, problem solving, modeling, and they describe their roles. So providing care, neurons, protection, socialization, monitoring. So the first function of the family is to nurture by solving basic needs. So this will be number 4 here, and you'll hit each of these and what that plays, and ch2lekt's things right here. And this is very interesting here about the functions of this. Is having knowledge here. Part of understanding the cultural differences is having knowledge of how parents socialize their children according to native culture norms. And I'm not sure how you do that, and she doesn't really get into that here, how you know those norms. The socialization varies. For example, respect for elders is norm in most cultures, but in others, such as Latino or Asian, it's even more important in the socialization process. So that you can kind of go from there, that expecting elders. Another example, extended family plays is raising children. For some cultures, the role is very integral, but whereas others, this may not be the case. There's also variations within culture that often result how the parents were raised. For instance, this is really controversial here. In some African American families, speaking Ebonics is very important. Whatever the rearing process, most children learn to internalize their parents' value system. And this has been very controversial over the years, and I suspect it will continue about those types of things. So that is the function of families. Let's go on to parenting styles, and we have this. I want to go here first, and this will just help you recognize this. It doesn't change anything, and it may be the same or different than you. And so let's look at it this way. The authoritative is the democratic decision-making guidelines and parameters, effective communication, problem-solving, disciplinary responsibilities. And then an authoritarian, different than the authoritative, it's a demanding parent, absolute rules, restrictive environment. The laissez-faire, anything goes, neglectful parent who no one cares, withdrawal from parental responsibilities. And then this one's a little tougher, dysfunctional, because it could include all of these: alcohol, drug addicted, neurotic, mentally ill, abusive. Those, and that's what this says here. And so first, to create an awareness, I'm going to come here and ask you to, back on chapter 2 here, is for you to respond to what type of parenting were you raised with? And then I'm going to respond right away to it here and say, I was raised under an authoritarian. My era was that of authoritarian, and yours is different. So let's start from there. And I don't want you to start anything here you don't want to deal with if it's this, but you can decide here which of these apply and see if you can connect with those at all. And then it gives you a little thing for each of these. I think I better put that on here for you. So number 5 here will be discuss. Okay, so you got that. So, and then they give you what the issues are for each of these. Go ahead and take you down here. If the types of families are multiplied by the number of configurations, the individual personal difference for each child or parent, comparing that to work effectively, the parents, teachers, child workers must individualize their suggestion responses. So, like saying here, it takes you through some things here. For example, the authoritarian in my family are expected to mind their parents without question about the precipitated issue. The children do not get an opportunity to resolve the conflict, to learn from actions, except to learn that punishment will follow no matter what. And that was a lot how I was raised. See, little training and decision making under their parenting styles, children may never learn to mind, but they also learn to avoid being caught and perhaps to lie when they are. And that sounds very familiar. So what are these social issues? And this is takes a little bit. So first of all, let me just pop this up, and this is how Dr. Rojas can approach it: is the role of the father, and then effects of divorce, and then this thing of blended families, and then one's headed by grandparents, and then poverty and homelessness. So let's get at that. First of all, this fatherhood issue. In her last edition of this, she did some, but she spends a lot more time on this one. And so she says this: 1912 provides information to families about caring with their infants. Historically, though, fathers were mentioned in the publication and the advice directed to mothers. So obviously that's changed. Country fathers were viewed as superfluous, treated them, began in the 60s, gained momentum in the 70s, and was thought for a long time that fathers didn't matter. Mother was the only one that mattered, and now, of course, consensus is that's not the case at all. For example, here, so a national initiative, these groups respond to data from the negative aspects of being raised without a father. There's some case being made now that a lot of these kids doing shootings at school were raised without a father for whatever reason, and including that children are 3 times more likely to fail at school and 2 to 3 times more likely to experience emotional and behavior problems requiring psychiatric treatment, and 3 times more likely to commit suicide as adolescents, and 5 times more likely to be poor. And what's interesting, I think, is this likelihood to be poor feeds some of these other things. But nonetheless, Dr. Rojas, through the research here, is trying to make a case how important fathers are. Even when the families came from same social economic backgrounds, children without a father present had more challenges than those who had both parents. In 2-parent families, it is important that family members are supportive of one another and their conflicts, abuse be absent. And of course, they're talking about divorce or blended families. Or now you would easily have a big number of families with there maybe are 2 parents that have never married. And you and I could both name several families we know like that they have never married, aren't together, but co-parent, because it's so commonly accepted now. Having male as a father figure such as uncle, grandfather seems to have a positive effect on their lives. So if there could be somebody else, and again, I don't know if that affects you at all as a teacher, affects you more in your personal life, but Dr. Rojas wants you to understand the effects it's going to have on school, are either present or looking ways to be involved in children's lives like that. So research on the fathers, she goes on here, fathers indicator framework. Let's go back to this. I'm going to give you all of these for number 6 here. And again, I just want you to put something for each of these, and let me show you where that is. First of all, research on fathers is this part here. If you would take a look at this, especially these indicator categories, that's what the research says. And then the importance of fathers here. Yeah, do this one for research. A fathering indicator framework provides 6 positive fathering indicator categories, and then you bring those in for the research. And the importance of fathers. Heightened interest in father goes hand in hand with increasing number of women who work outside the home. Many young fathers see the expression of love towards children as fulfillment of their own lives. Prefer involvement in family activities. And I would say I would be an indication that my role raising my kids was dramatically different than my dad's. I changed nearly every diaper for my kids. I don't think my dad ever changed one. Much more traditional, so that's how it's changed that way. And then suggestions for fathers. How about if I just do this rather than now just bring this in. You accept your child, use positive parenting, those 6 things. Let's just have you put those here. Okay. Then about involving fathers in school, and she has some nice examples here on how to do that. And so you talk about that right here, that. Then divorce. Divorce rate fluctuated between 2011 with the highest rates in 2002. Let me clip this for you also. let's look at this here, how it's changed. And it's maybe the best, easiest way is to look at this. And what happened, of course, is the rape per population went down, but you got to remember the number of marriages went down, the percentage of marriages went down. So that I think explains some of this. And so it's really hard to get a divorce if you've never married, and hence a lot of co-parenting now of people that have never married, and it has dropped here. But let's take a look at what this economic status of parents who divorce changes drastically. So the biggest change, there's a thing on the test about that, is the biggest change after divorce is financial, economic. And about 24.6% of custodial parents and their children had incomes below the poverty level in 2007. And so that's a high number. And again, what this research does not tell you is what that percentage was prior to the divorce. That often they maybe were under this poverty prior to that. So that's always the thing with research and data, is it doesn't always tell the whole tale. It tells the narrative that they want it to tell. Issues such as health care and child support that custodial and non-custodial parents face affect their economic well-being. And that's not rocket science. And of course, often if they're living in poverty, if there is to be child support or something like that, it's either it could be not paid, or the person to be paying doesn't have income or something like that. And then divorce causes change in the families. You can imagine what goes with that. So here is number 7. And you give me something about each of these 3. Here is those changes to the family. Obviously, the biggest being economics. Children can be ashamed. Despite most children's negative feelings about their parents' separation, divorce may improve the situation. And there's that. Okay, successful established single-parent family remarriage. And that's the thing that doesn't often connected well, is the connection between divorce and remarriage to blended families. And again, it doesn't have to be marriage to reblend families. Often two consenting people moving in together creates this new household with kids in there. But it can change the quality of life with 2 together. And it can be same gender or not necessarily. 2 children, the initial adverse feelings reduced over time, like this. And again, the thing it does not take into account in this research is what was the status prior to divorce. What kind of socioeconomic home are they coming from, and to have an adequate comparison. And then children's response to this. Divorced parents, some children are more resilient than others. So as a teacher, one of the most challenging times I had as a child was when the parents going through divorce. Okay, another part of children adjust to divorce to reassure that they are not the cause of it. Okay, so here, down here, teachers, administrators must recognize that during the period of divorce, families in turmoil. And again, you don't need to have this from Dr. Rojas, you know that. And so what grace do you give children or students in your care during this time? And here's a bigger one for you. How long does it last? So it gives you some suggestions here. And single parent families, we go on here, right here, and it talks about this importance to learn the parents' names by checking records. And that's a huge thing for you, is never assume anything in families. Even though we looked back at the definition at the beginning between household and families, here's what I learned to do, and I learned it the hard way, is whenever one of your students comes with an adult, you would simply ask it this way. And this is a cheap way out of it. You simply say to the student, who is this with you today? And then they say, oh, this is my mom, or this is my stepmom, or this is my grandma, or my aunt, or my cousin, or whatever, or my dad's girlfriend. And then you look that adult in the eye and say, what is your name? And then you connect it, this about checking the records, but determining their names, and learn those and call them by their name, so that you're adequate that way. And then use that care and communication. And this is a pretty good thing too, is be careful your terms like bring your grandparent or bring your grand-friend today. And we had to do that when my kids were in elementary. They had Grandparents' Day, and rarely, if ever, my kids still had grandparents, but they weren't available. So we had an elderly neighbor up the street, Virgil, that always went and represented grandparents on Grandparents' Day. And of course, we didn't get hung up on, was it grand-friend or anything, but you want to be careful of your titles and phrases because of how non-traditional, like Mom's Day, Dad's Day, when there's two same gender families or something, you could get yourself in some trouble with that. But you grew up in this time, you won't make those mistakes. You'll be aware, and Dr. Rojas is simply giving you a little heads up on that, on the single parent families here. Okay, so let's talk about the blended families. Complex social organization of blended families, remarried families. Some may be offspring of the mother, some of the father. The remaining may be born in a remarried couple. So you see lots of examples of this, and maybe some of you are from, relate to this kind of a family. But Yours, Mine, and Ours was a movie that came out many years ago, and the father had some children that came to the family, and mother did, and then they had children of their own. And so create some interesting dynamics, become some half-sisters, half-brothers, those kinds of things. In addition, it may have a similar situation. Their other biological parent, and so now they have a whole new family that father goes to remarry and mother goes to remarry, and all that goes with that. And then if they're all in your same school, you got a whole nother set of things. And then you get these step-siblings and halves. And it could be as many, Dr. Rojas says, could be 30 configurations. And so maybe we start with that here. Number 8. And you want to put in the 30 configurations here. And then the cycle, this blended family cycle that Dr. Rojas refers. They've blended 3 stages of this blended family cycle. And you want to bring these in here, and that will be part of this, is the blended family cycle there. Okay. And you want to take a look at that. And there's some questions on the test about it, and it gets into this fantasy, immersion, and awareness, and then restructuring and solidifying. And the first 2 stages generally divided according to biological lines, but the third, the family's created a new bond. And so during that fantasy stage, the first stage, they visualize new marriage, provide support. You go through the second phase, immersion, and then the third phase is restructuring and mobilization. And there's it explains each of these. Final stage is the family is set the entire faculty, set the entire blended family cycle affects children. So she walks you through that, and she does a pretty nice job explaining this to you. And so let's move up and talk about families headed by grandparents. And I contend, unlike her leanings here, is that this is never by design. As parents, you envision your children growing up and becoming parents and having their own household. And so when grandparents are the primary here, I contend to you, there's been some duress leading to that. The role of acknowledged senses, which the first time ever included questions regarding grandparents, part of rearing. And again, it tends to happen way more in our lower socioeconomic group of folks. And again, Dr. Rojas does not want to go there and explain that, but what I'm simply saying is this will be much more common in a low socioeconomic school than in our middle class schools. Not good, not bad, just different. This showed that the number of grandparents maintaining families doubled from 70 to 2,000. The care for grandchildren was maintained by 2.4 million grandparent caregivers, equates to 3.9% of all households. And that seems high because I don't really know of any families like this, but this is what the research says. And of those families, 3.9%, 19% incomes are below poverty. So that she gives you that number. Live with the family, but there are grandparents provide the financial support. So that's interesting too, if you know that they live with parents, but grandpa and grandma foot the bill. Different from families who have grandparents move in with them. That's a different dynamic. And that usually means when the grandparents move in, that means that you're going to care for the grandparents. But when you move in with the grandparents, often that says they are going to be the primary caregivers and certainly the breadwinners for extended period times. That gives you some more statistics here. Here's the unique needs down here. This, I cannot believe this to be true. But if it's here, it must be. It says 1 in 10 child live with a grandparent. Okay, and so that is, you're going to connect this here as far as families headed by grandparents, what the unique needs are here. Okay, majority of grandparent maintained families differ from households maintained by parents. These differences include the educational level of the grandparent, who may have graduated high school or may not. And the grandparents may have had professions, may have been professional people. Less of that, I would assume, which may be high income. Even when grandparents work and have health insurance, the insurance often do not cover grandchildren. So you could have that to deal with. So let's take a look at the poverty. Children in poverty, the changing face of poverty, poverty casualties, ways to counteract poverty. Here is defined in the United States according to the income of the person or poverty of a family. Poverty implies that people lack resources relative to what they need. So we can see how poverty has fluctuated in the United States from 59 to 11. The number of children living in poverty increased from 08 to 09, from 19 to 20%. Most families live in poverty due to unemployment or loss of employment, and that is the number one thing right there. And generally people live so close to the edge that even a temporary thing causes that. Change of family structure, lack of education, addictions, health problems, among other reasons. I'm going to let you look at that. Some of the reasons families live in poverty. You have ever met families who are in this situation? The video explains that many families in this difficult. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to see if I can get there.
Helen Rivas is a 32-year-old mother of 3.
So I'm going to link this here, and you know how to link. I'm going to just copy this, and I'm going to put this right in here for you. do it this way, because I know how to do this. Watch how I do this. I'm going to link it right here for you. And I do it like this. And I will also link it on the note outline for you. And then we got this. I'm going to have you, for number 9, give a little report on that. A couple lines on that video. Okay. Okay. And then let's come back here to the changing faces of poverty. It says here this was the downturn increased this poverty rate. Researchers state that single mother families are 5 times more likely to be poor as married families. And that, again, that's not profound to you, that you know that. All right. Here, this will help you with the video too. Video explains that for many families it's difficult to pay bills when salaries are low, often when family members lose their jobs. And that's usually always the thing, they lose a job. Most single mother family also qualify for government assistance programs like income support programs like welfare and food stamps. High rate of divorce, the fact that more people are opting not to marry, increase the chance of family living in poverty. Policies that help such families increase economic well-being, in particular open the doors to young children. And of course it's here it lists some of the charities that can be, but another big thing is the addiction things, the drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. So even people that are married, but again, single mothers, it's from there's distress in the family, and this again is where often grandparents step in and take a role. Here's the changing faces. Discrimination has negative effect on social economic well-being of cultural and linguistic diverse families such as African American, Latinos, Native American. Half our nation's poor are African American or Latino. Increased in groups except for the Asian population, and nobody ever explains that. See, she stops here. What do you suppose that is? I'm going to give you that one too as the discussion here. Say not in poverty. It's very, very interesting, but interesting your opinion here. Why are Asians not in poverty, unlike all the others that are listed here? And then, so that's casualties. These 3 here will be number 10. And then here's the casualties we went through. Creating major health problems. That always goes with it. Exists culture poverty often means feel depressed, powerless, or effective change, unable to control one's destiny. Those types of things goes on. For processing infants, although poverty has a look of despair, many families work together to provide for children. Education and training appear to be the keys. That's always kind of been the thing. The silver bullet is education, but we don't ever quite get there. Because many face such issues as lack of insurance, lack of medical care, they live in neighborhoods where crime is prevalent. And they have negative school experiences. So this is where you play a role, is this negative experience, and unfortunately that's quite common. and it says due to their socioeconomic status. I don't know if that's a correlation, just because I think it's the other way. I think their negative school experience causes their socioeconomic status, but instead of the other way around. Many government agencies, such as Administration for Children and Families, under the Department of Health and Human Services, provide such things as Head Start and this more common one, temporary assistance to needy families, to help families survive, hopefully break that cycle of poverty. So there's government money for that. Who have been self-sufficient suddenly find themselves without employment, face tremendous psychological adjustments. And I think that's more true. A family that has spent a lifetime or several generations in poverty, that isn't. But somebody that has always been, comes from a family that has always been self-sufficient, that can be a big thing. And she does a nice job here talking about that. And it goes back to the thing we looked at before, table 2.2. And then here's the ways to counteract poverty that goes right here. Stress and poverty, parents need at least the following: a decent standard of living, jobs that pay enough to adequately rear children, flexible working conditions so children can be cared for, an integrated network of family services, legal protection of children outside of the inside of the family, and a place to live, preferably on their own. And the only thing I would add, preferably in a neighborhood that doesn't endanger all of these things. And again, you don't get to control that. You just do the best you can at loving these kids and supporting these kids, and giving them just what you would anybody else, because they're not going to be easy to love and care for. They're going to be dramatically different than what you know. And then homelessness. And we have the same kind of a deal. Reading the section of homeless, please watch this video, and let me just take us there. This one's only 3 minutes, so I'm going to give you this one also. And I'm going to link it right on here onto homelessness. Nope, that isn't the one I want. And I want to put this link in here. And I tell it to save. It'll be there now when I come back here. And perception of families represented in the video. So what are your perceptions of people are homeless? How does the video change your perception? And so you write about this a little bit here. Again, this will be number 11, about the video and your perception. Okay. 3.5, American experience homelessness. And homelessness doesn't mean street people. I've seen before, working with students who are homeless, you assume means they're living in the street. And that's, I'm telling you, in this day and age, if somebody's living in the street, it is a degree of mental illness. There is so much support for people that have temporary loss that generally it's not necessary. All the street people I've ever met that lived in the street almost exclusively, and I've met a few in my time, are suffering from some degree of mental illness, because there's lots of different programs for this. And so homeless means might be in the car, heaven forbid, or generally a lot of these programs will put them up in hotels or something like that. It talks about here a motel, hotel, emergency shelter. Those are all available. This McKinney-Vento Homeless Act kicks in $70 million a year for these programs. Okay, so I'm going to go back up here. Children make up 23% of these homeless, so they end up in these temporary shelters. Report at conference mayors points out the 3 main reasons why people experience homelessness are lack of affordable housing, poverty, and unemployment. Well, poverty goes with these other two. without homes lack more than just housing. Another report, homeless single mothers have never held a job for longer than 6 months. And so you can see that creates some problems also. Generally underrated if you had job skills. And so I don't know what we do about that after 100 years of this. Probably the abuse of alcohol and drugs, often the victims of domestic violence. Currently about 1.35 million children that are homeless. And again, I say, it doesn't mean they're in the streets. It means they don't have a permanent place they call home. It's kind of a moving, flexible thing. So what happens, these children, they have acute and chronic health problems, experience emotional behavior problems, have issues in good school performance. And here's a part that's left out. Again, I want to say as a teacher, another thing that comes into play here is they never have had the structure to learn school habits of on time, and have never had structure as far as their norms at their home. They've never had boundaries. Parents are always not in emotional state well enough to handle that. And again, you don't get to change that. You just get to know that that's one of the things that you're up against and the children are up against, is they don't know any different. They haven't had to have self-control themselves like the middle-class kids. And so they're going to function altogether different. Start here again with other people out of homes. In addition to single mothers, include unemployed two-parent families, single men and women, jobless people. Those. So here is this McKentry Act, and these will be 12 here. Feds here. And then authorized rights who are experiencing homeless, and that is here, and it takes you that. And then concern of children experiencing homelessness, and I highlighted a few things here for you, like homeless children may suffer from learning difficulties, speech delays, behavior problems, depression, anxiety, short attention spans, aggression, withdrawal. And again, I say to you, because they have no prior training, parents are not strong enough to work with them on self-control and boundaries and things like that. And before you judge, if you were homeless, you may not have the strength, emotional strength to raise children either. So the children end up kind of raising themselves. And just know this is what comes with it. And Cox Help here, she talks about nutritional deficiencies, health problems, delayed immunizations, poor iron levels, all the things that come with that. So what are the parents' desires here? What's this one? Concern for children experiencing homeless. You've got that there. And then parents' desires here. And then these programs, Homes for Homeless, American Family Inns, are some of those there. And then that goes there. So that's what you have. Chapter 2, the diversity of families. And it give you some insight.